because I think when I mess with stuff, it makes it worse. But while we're doing that, Mr. Bruski, good morning.
This is live.
I think
Are we
so.
live?
I think so.
Are we glitching? Are we just like pixelated? What's up?
I think
I'm
we're
not looking.
I think we're glitching. I think we're glitching, but I can't. I don't have the RAM to go check anything else. I'm just closing everything. The only thing's open right now is the encoder that's sending our video, the chat room window, and a notepad document, and then I'm recording us also. So it's still, I have to have a couple things open. This is why I desperately need to win my my $200 buy-in league so that I can win like $1,200 or $1,300, whatever first place is, and go buy myself a nice new computer. New computer. That'll be part of Hoopball 2.0 when Dan can run a live stream effectively. How's life, man? I haven't talked to you much this week because I've been buried under it.
Life is good. I just tweeted out some of the HB6 stuff. So things are going well here for the fantasy side. It's chaos in the fantasy worlds. I almost don't even want to talk about it today. No, I've been kind of getting my feet underneath me. For those of you who watch the show quite often, y'all know I'm dealing with some neck thing, and it's a kind of a scourge to my life. But I have been able to get in the pool and get back out to the Kings Arena, do a couple reporter-like things, and so yeah, that makes me happy. I'm definitely ready for all the stuff that we're going to be doing in the off season. That said, we have 2 weeks here to finish strong, and I literally I just read the injury report, and I'm like, what do we do here, man? What do we do?
Well, I'm glad you asked because that's all the stuff I have to talk about when I actually hit the official record button on this one.
I don't even. It's like I don't even want to talk about it though. It's so bad.
We have to. We have to.
I know we have to. It's not even a have to. It's like this is winning time, so we want to. But I am just okay now. Everybody always asks like, is this the worst year for injuries? They ask it every year. I haven't really cared, but now I kind of want to know.
I think
is
it might
this
be
the worst year.
It's got to be the worst. It's everybody. There's nobody left.
I just read the injury report, like top to bottom, and I was like, you could have just listed the healthy people.
Yeah, it was the non-injury report. Is it like Karl Anthony Towns, knock on wood? See the only guy?
You shouldn't even say that right now, man.
I'm going to just list every single one of them so people know who's due. Drop them before they get hurt because it's coming this week.
And we've ranted so much on this stuff, but it's kind of like, there's a news story, whatever it is, and everybody gets tired of it, but it's still a story.
It's a story for sure, and I haven't hit the record button yet, so we can rant all we want right now. I want to rant about Blake Griffin because I actually think that one's kind of funny. I know it's hurting some teams, but I love that he's going to be evaluated in about a week. How long's the season,
Sweet.
Brew? How much time we got left this year? About a week? Idiots.
I don't know, man. But I will say this: things have gotten interesting from like the regular NBA perspective. With the injury to Steph, it's added at least a little wrinkle there. You got playoff matchups coming up. The bottom of the West is pretty stacked for a bottom of the West as far as that goes.
Yeah, and the tank battle. Oh, the tank battle is really hot.
The tank battle's like, what was it, Wednesday night? I looked at the slate Wednesday night, and I was like, what the hell is this? This is like the worst schedule of games on a Wednesday night I'd ever seen in 10 years of doing this. Not like the only game that was moderately interesting was the completely injured Celtics who have nothing to play for against the Utah Jazz.
And the Celtics won.
Like, what? Every other game included either like one clearly tanking team and then one team that probably just, marked that down as a win, even though I think, what Memphis beat Minnesota that night.
Oops.
It's ugly out there, man.
That was a big oopsies for the Timberwolves losing that game to Memphis. What a big oopsies. That was in Minnesota, too.
Yeah. And they're a fun story, I'll admit. I like talking Wolves because, Tibbs's grip on sanity and his team seems to be tenuous at best.
I watched that. Oh man, I have so many things that I want to rant about. I watched some of that game The other one, they played another tanking team and won. Who did they beat? Because they beat somebody this week also, right? Didn't they lose one and win one? Hey, Atlanta. The other one was Atlanta. I can't pull up any internet windows right now because my computer's overloaded. So it's all going to be whatever's in the dome. When Karl Anthony Towns went totally nutso, and there was like 6 minutes where they tried to play Gorgie Jang, and he tried to grab a pass that was intended for the guy standing right behind him, and couldn't you just feel his heart sink in that moment where he's like, oh, that was it for the day?
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of funny because like Gorgie's confidence is just so shot.
None.
Like he's just the different guy. Whoever gets him next is going to have a treasure chest of new confidence. Confidence is so fleeting in the NBA. Watching Spencer Dinwiddie play the last 2-3 weeks, D'Angelo Russell's been brought back and like he's terrible. Like watching him play basketball is like watching somebody scratch their nails on a chalkboard. And I got in this conversation on Twitter with this guy who legitimately thinks he's better, but he's not. He's terrible. And Spencer Dinwiddie is watching this guy get forced the minutes and forced the touches, and he's completely lost his confidence. And you could just see it all over his face. He's a really smart dude, and he's sitting there going, what the hell is this? Like, this used to be my team, and now it's no longer my team, so I guess I'm just terrible now.
I feel like I need to play Madonna's "This Used to Be Our Playground" in the background of this rant. Like the closing credits to A League of Their Own just rolling behind you right now.
Only people our age would get that and why that's so cool.
Absolutely. Spencer Dinwiddie, we got your jam right now. But here's the thing.
What?
Don't you think that...
He could snap out of that any second now.
I got a question to ask you about him, too. Do you think maybe the management went to him before all this happened and was just like, hey, Spence, we're going to jam this round peg in a square hole for 3 weeks. Can you just, like, chill out? We're not going to get you hurt here, and you'll be cool next season. I mean, if there's a communication, then this could all be solved.
I think they came to him and said, we're going to play him. And I think his response was, why? And then they were like, deal with it.
Trade value.
And yeah, well, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, they made a small gamble. I don't know if it was a small, it was a gamble of some type. But no, I mean, this is the peril of players that are not highly drafted. They don't have an agent that's leveraging with management. Like, if you don't play my guy, good luck getting the next guy. That's the name of the game. Whenever you see minutes issues at the NBA level where it's like stupid, just really stupid stuff like Kendrick Perkins way back in the day, like Kevin Durant wanted him on the floor. That was what it was. And, with D'Angelo Russell, he's going to get that run. And I would say this, though. I don't think you could keep Spencer Dinwiddie down. He is probably not the safest play going forward, but, just an example of players losing their confidence. But yeah, if you're lowly drafted, like, you just have such an uphill climb to get the minutes to start showing that you're good.
Baseball's the same thing. Baseball's the same. These minor league guys drafted in the first 3 or 4 rounds, they'll give those dudes the full 6 years of run, even if they're just straight up terrible. And if you're like a 35th rounder and you don't perform in the first year and a half, off you go. Try another one. But it's all about money being sunken into things and so on and so forth. You want to record?
The sunk cost fallacy is what it is.
Yes, it is. Want to record a show?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. You can say whatever you want, man. Well, no. Can we? It's YouTube. What are we allowed to say?
I don't give a shit.
In 3.
Sorry, you baited me into swearing.
Yeah, I did.
Put $1 in the swear jar.
That's right. Put it in there. I don't know what it's going to, but put it in the swear jar.
It's going. We'll donate it to the homeless.
All right, that works. I'm on board with that. Shit. Put one in there too.
This show's getting off to a rollicking start.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a donation. All right, we're gonna record this thing in 3, 2, 1. Oh, boy. Well, people say the stream is good, which is a weird thing to say to open a show, but we're going to do it anyway. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today live on Fridays. We are hopping on YouTube. We are live via the chat room as well on YouTube, and now we are officially being recorded for today's episode of Fantasy NBA Today. I am Dan Besbris. I am joined, as always, on Friday by the architect of hoopball, the great Aaron Bruski, fighting depression. I lie. He's doing fine. He's Zoolandering the camera, and I bid you good morning. What's going on, architect? What you got something wrong with your lips right now?
No, I'm practicing my stare down of the camera.
Oh, okay. I don't ever look at my camera, which is probably a bad thing for video, but here, I'm going to do it just briefly. Wave into the camera. That'll be awkward for everyone.
No, it's funny. I was watching Comcast the other, my buddy James Hammond, and I was commenting how he's got he's figured out how to stare down the camera. Because if you're doing TV, you got to stare down the camera.
It's weird. You know what they do to help, though? A lot of times is they'll have the teleprompter over the camera lens, so you can just look right at the words, and it'll appear as though you're staring at the camera. And if you look really closely at people on the news, you can see their eyes just twitching ever so slightly as they read the words across that very narrow, scrolling teleprompter. Well, I'll tell you right now, Bruski does not have a teleprompter. Whatever he's about to say is completely unpredictable, San Diego. And I'm worried every Friday. I have a lot of things to talk about. I prepared a longer than average list for today's show. We're going to jump into that momentarily. For those uninitiated who thought, man, their show sure looks pretty all of a sudden, I'm going to go give it a look. This is Fantasy NBA Today, Friday edition. We go live on YouTube every week at Dan Besbris, at Aaron Bruski, at Hoopball Fantasy, if you want to give any of the three entities here a follow on Twitter. I have a list of things that happened over the course of the previous week. I'm going to bug Aaron about each and every one of them, one by one, and then we're going to take questions from the chat room, which I assumed this week was going to be relatively quiet, and so far I am somewhat correct. Most people are either out of moves already for their streaming week or kind of riding it out and stat hunting, so I predicted accurately, and thus I think we'll probably have more of a like 80-20 split of Dan's topics and chat room topics, as opposed to the usual more 50-50 go. But, Brew, what's on your mind, my man? It's been a week. I've been buried under generally a lack of nanny help this week, so, I've mostly just been watching a kid scream at me for 4 days. What's going on in the rest of the universe?
It's been a weird, wild week for me. I've been able to get kind of back on track, just personally, health-wise. I've been able to get back into the pool, swimming. I've got that neck injury, and, kids, if you're listening to this, you're not indestructible forever. Practice good posture. It makes you look better too, but it like actually is an important thing. I had a slipped disc basically, and all because of posture. Anyway, back in the pool, feeling good. I got back into the Kings arena, working on a story involving the Kings and the protests and everything having to do with Stephen Clark. So that was kind of getting dropped back into the deep end on that front. And all throughout the week, also working with our developers on all this next generation stuff. Whether we're talking player profile pages or statistical analysis or all the cool stuff that we want to bring to the table. Just a lot of different stuff. It's hard. It almost hasn't even fazed me that the end of the fantasy season is here, which is also weird because half the league is injured.
Yeah, bumpy. It's been a bumpy couple of weeks.
It's bumpy. I will actually take it a step further. I think it's unfulfilling when injuries are driving this much of the discussion. I know that we dealt with it in football back when I was a football writer for Roto World, and there's nothing worse than having your league decided by injuries in a sort of unnatural way. I mean, you expect injuries to happen. We're dealing with injuries, tanking, and I think it's, I'll be interested to see what the league does this summer. I did write an article about what you could do to reform the draft. I think that the one idea that I put forward, well, not only was it the best idea that's out there, it was the simplest idea that's out there, which would be to bring to penalize these teams they're just hardcore tanking, moving their second round pick later than teams that make the bottom 4 slots in each conference for the playoffs. So to encourage teams that have, an 8 seed or a 7 seed to want to do that, everybody says that if you're in the middle, well, if you're not first, you're last, that kind of thing. If you could get a number 31 or 32 pick out of it, and we've seen tons of great players picked in the early 30s, that would maybe keep teams from being so aggressive, because now you only have one bullet when you're tanking, trying to get that number 1 and number 31 pick. You would be looking at number 1 and number 39 and on so down the list. So there's it's been just a weird week, but I will say this, in the good news department, the Hoop Ball 6 is just freaking killing it. And it's to the point where I don't think even the most optimistic version of myself could have predicted it.
So on the tanking front, and then I do want to talk about the Hoop Ball 6 guys, because it's been a pretty enjoyable last couple of months or so on that front. What are the I forget, honestly. This is just my own brain kind of gassing out here at the end of the year. The collective bargaining agreement that was agreed upon with the new tanking rules, that goes into effect for next year. But do you remember, Brew, off the top of your head, how that impacts the teams at the bottom for next season? It has something to do with the fact that, like, the bottom 4 or 5 teams all have the same probability of getting the number 1 pick, right? I can't remember precisely the changes going into it, but they're supposed to be trying to make it kind of a wash. If you're out of the playoffs, you're all kind of in the same general bucket.
Yeah, I'm looking at the odds right now. So the new lottery odds are flattened.
Which is next offseason, right?
Yeah, it's not this offseason. And so previously you had a 25% chance at the number 1 pick as the top tanking team. And so now it's 14% across the bottom or across the board for teams 1 through 3. And then where the odds start to get, I think, a little bit more generous is like team 8 has a 6% chance versus previously they had a 2.8% chance. I don't know if I like that, because, like, I mean, I'll just pick the team in my backyard. The Kings are kind of floating around that mark, and I think that their approach, if they were the number 1 team, which they were a little while back, versus where they sit now in the 8th position in the tank ranks, or tank race, because the tank ranks are something completely different. I just think you're almost encouraging that. You're saying, hey, look, you actually have a better shot now at getting that number 1 overall pick. 6% is not nothing.
I like it.
2.8% is nothing.
I like it, though. Like, that encourages a team to play more like, okay, so the Kings might not be the greatest example because they're still trotting Vince Carter out there on a nightly basis. But, a team like, take the Lakers, for instance, who maybe, obviously they don't have their pick this year, so they're playing hard and trying to rack up wins. What if they end up with like the 9th or 10th worst record, and they've actually been trying for the year? That's good. That's good for both sides. Where it's
which
not
team's trying?
The Lakers have been trying.
Oh, I thought you said the Grizzlies for some reason.
No. Heavens,
I'm
no.
not awake yet.
But then to compare that with, like, for instance, what the Dallas Mavericks are doing, which is just there's some seriously egregious tanking going on here, where the Mavs realized that they had a prayer to win a game. So they just played 4 G Leaguers down the stretch. Did you see that?
Down
the stretch.
To update my tank. So why there was the distinction was the tank ranks, or me ranking who is tanking the hardest. Who's just like unabashedly tanking and saying F you to the league, because, like, what are you going to do to us? Like, everybody's been doing it for 10 years. You're not going to make us the example. And that's the tank ranks, and I don't know who's on top. It was previously Memphis, and then I think it was Oh, who was after Memphis? It was
Chicago's got to be up there, right?
Yeah, Chicago was number 2. I think Phoenix was up there.
I might move Dallas into the top 3 with what they pulled against the Lakers, because I was straight up trying to lose a game.
It's almost like they know that Cuban's already paid his fine, and that the league probably doesn't want to shine a big light on Dallas right now because of the stuff with the front office.
Yeah.
This has been the least enjoyable kind of like March and April that the league has had in a little bit. I mean, the East is already sewn up. The top 8 seeds are set in stone, or not set in stone, but the top 8 teams are set in stone. And in the West,
you've got like 6 out of 30 teams that are actually trying right now.
Yeah, it's bad.
Maybe 8 if you put them.
It's been tough for fantasy owners because, I mean, like when the Steph thing was an actual injury. But prior to that, the ankle thing wasn't that serious. Kevin Durant's rib thing was not that serious. Anything that Draymond Green is doing right now is basically not that serious in the grand scheme of things. These are big pieces of your team, Mm-hmm. So it's been tough, and so we'll sort through it all. And as far as the tanking goes, I think my idea is the best. We should go with that one.
I might give the Mavs my top tank rank these days for playing 4 G Leaguers down the stretch of competitive game, and also giving a guy coming back from a thumb injury maintenance days.
Yeah, that whole return from injury management tag has to just go away.
My God, brutal.
How are you? I mean, unless you want to say that his knee is a problem still, Nerlens Noel. They
haven't said that.
I don't think that's the case.
Nope. And then Dennis Smith Jr. playing like 21 minutes because he was making shots. The classic pull a guy as soon as he gets hot, tank move.
You know what's weird about that? He was in Sacramento the other day, was it Sacramento?
Yeah, I
don't know
so.
if it was in Sacramento, but he was like, he looked hobbled. He did not look good out there, and it's so weird the way teams do it, because like if you can pull a pin somewhere in your team and have the team essentially tank, and then so like Dennis Smith Jr. is obviously a very good player, and he's somebody that they want to develop, but they're running him out there with injuries. It's either his knee or his ankle, but he was hobbling, and it's like, well, if you guys are doing all this other stuff to tank, why are you so hell-bent on getting Dennis Smith Jr. minutes? And the answer to that is he has not really had a consistent season.
No,
they
not,
want
not
him,
at all.
They figure it's a maintenance injury. It's probably not that bad, but they want him to end the season on a high note. So they're just doing all sorts of different things. And, like if you're the Kings, you could just throw, Jakar Sampson or, some player like Bruno Caboclo in for 15 minutes, and that might get you a win or a loss, however you're looking at it.
Yay! Tank time. All right, well, some of these names do appear on Dan's list, so let's go through them in now what I will call a slightly more organized fashion. But I think it's important to get a little bit off our chests here, because we're all dealing with it. I tweeted this morning that I actually kind of forgot how unbelievably stressful Money League head-to-head playoff weeks are. This week is the last thing I needed, frankly, with chasing the kid around for so many hours. I am already dealing with the thinning hair issue, and this head-to-head week is like, it's crushing me. And I've had to make so many moves related to these injuries that I'm out of moves. So if anybody else falls dead on my team, that's just the end of it. Okay, so here are a few of the guys that got hurt this week, Brew. We'll try to get through them at a reasonable clip, but again, minimal questions here as people's seasons wind down, so feel free to take whatever time you need. Blake Griffin, evaluated in roughly a week. We joked about this before I hit the record button. Evaluated in roughly a week. The season is roughly a week longer. Week and a half. Fine. I mean, is there any reason to hang on to Blake Griffin at this point?
No. I mean, look. Some of your leagues, the last lineup decision is in 3 days. So you would not know how to use him in those leagues. And we're talking roto leagues, playoff leagues. Yeah, he's donezo. I mean, you might look at him if he comes back for 2 games, but I'm not even sure why they would do that. They're not quite ruled out of the playoffs yet, but I think that could happen any day now.
Yeah, they're basically out. And the fact that
they're
Milwaukee,
definitely not making it.
Right. And Milwaukee just had to win a couple of games, and they got this weird podunk Warriors thing where they got to steal a win easily yesterday. Detroit is effectively done. I figured if those guys were mostly healthy, they would trot their three main dudes out in Blake, Andre, and Reggie Jackson just to kind of give them a chance on the floor together, get a head start on next year. But if he's not healthy, and if he's going to be out officially at least a week, that's legitimately nothing left of the season. That's the overloaded
Dennis,
last day and so
Dennis
forth.
Smith Jr. situation, they're doing it with Reggie Jackson right now. Like, he's been out all year. He looked pretty banged up out there. He re-injured it, and he sort of walked it off, and they just want to see what they have in him. Yeah. And so there are some weird things like that happen at the end of the year. It's very possible that Blake Griffin comes back so they can see how that combo works out. So, I mean, but what are you doing there? If you're in a playoff format, this upcoming week is probably not even applicable to your team because we're telling you guys to do your playoffs, your final week sooner. But if you do play this final week, you're not going to have a real good idea in a weekly league that he's going to be available. So only if you're in a daily league, you can handle the absence aspect of it. Or if you're in Roto, you might be able to squeeze whatever how Detroit plays in that final week. What do they got? Yeah, they got 2 games in the final week. So, I mean, you might get that final week out of them.
Great. What about Joel Embiid? Sounds like he's out into the playoffs, right?
Yeah, there's really, I mean, Embiid kind of goes to the beat of his own drum. So, like, let's say he's in the bestest of best case scenarios, which I saw a report out of Philly that a doctor that was interviewed by CSN Philly said 2 weeks is like extremely optimistic. So that would mean that he's, got no chance practically of being back for your fantasy team in any format. And now it's Rashawn Holmes time. And I was talking with your boys over in Vegas.
About time.
And they asked me, like, what's up with Philly? I love Philly right now. Like, I think you should just roll with Philly against the spread or whatever the number is for the rest of the year. You got injured star theory and a player in Rashawn Holmes that is dying for minutes. And the team probably would like to, acquiesce and get him on the floor. They're going to start Amir Johnson because the Colangelos. And that's fine. I don't think that they're trying to burn Amir out in the last week and a half of the season. So, Rashawn Holmes, 25 minutes at a minimum. Let me turn the noise off on my computer so I'm not that guy. I think that he's a must own and going to be an impact player for fantasy teams the rest of the way. But as far as their odds go, like, they were like 16-1 to win the East a couple weeks ago. I think with this Embiid injury, the name value of it, like, that's going to shoot up to like 20-25-1 maybe. And I just think, why not them? Toronto's my favorite, and they might even be kind of a solid favorite at this point. I think LeBron is going to be LeBron, but like the rest of his team, you could just put question marks all over each of them. So why not Philly?
Niko Mirotic. Something doesn't look right with him. I know he missed a game with the hip thing, and they brought him back, and he had like 2 and 4. What do you do with a guy who's attempting to play through something that's obviously hobbling him?
You got to just kind of reassess your perception of what he is. He, prior to the injury, was a top 40 guy, pretty safely. Top 40 guy with a great situation where you knew he was going to get at least 25 minutes in a night, probably more. But now with the injury, I think knowing that he's pushing through it and probably not, doing things from a long-term perspective and rather doing them from a short-term perspective, trying to stay on the floor in this playoff chase, he's probably not getting all that healed up. Now, that's reading tea leaves. It's possible that, he just had one game of injury slowness. I'll split the difference in these situations or shift it in the direction that I think that it's needs to be shifted. I'd call him a top 80 to 100 player going forward, and carrying some risk that if you don't have a green light that he's in each of the games, or the playoff seeding starts to get to a point where the Pelicans and all of these teams start trying to target who they're playing. And some teams do that and some teams don't. So, you really have to kind of hopefully get some hard information out of a local source that's like, yeah, these guys aren't playing hard, or something tips your hand, like they start benching a lot of people instead of going for the gusto. The West is very, very clumped up. So, after the top seeds in the West, you've got Portland's more or less gained the separation that they need, but you've got San Antonio and the Jazz at 8. So San Antonio at 4, the Jazz at 8, separated by just a game and a half. So home court advantage is still on the line for whoever can get that 4 seed. And really, if you can get a 5 or a 6 seed right now, you can avoid the Rockets and Warriors. So 7 and 8 are going to try to win like hell, and the Pelicans are right in the middle of that at 6. So I think at this point you just treat them like a top 80 to 120 player, and hopefully they don't, fall into this position where their seeding is set, because then I think they'd rest him.
Yeah. What about Otto Porter? Sounds like his is maybe less severe than initially thought. The turned ankle.
Man, this is the only Otto Porter, the player, Otto Porter, the fantasy asset. Like, no questions whatsoever heading into this year. Otto Porter's hip and just that general, like, if you have a hip that's not good, it affects the way you run. It affects the way you land. It's just such a big deal. And not all of this stuff is connected. But that's been my only question with that guy for basically the entire year. There's going to be some slippage as well when John Wall gets back pretty much any time now, where it takes a little bit for everybody to get used to playing with him again. And I think that it's going to be tough on the Wizards, who incidentally are sitting in the 6th seed and right now are slated to play the Cavs. I think that's also an interesting sort of tanking situation in the East where, I know Cleveland's had their struggles, but you probably don't want to face LeBron in round 1. So they can't get up to 5. There's separation there. 4 and 5, 3, 4, and 5 are within a half game of each other. So those teams have quite a bit to play for as of today. That could change in about 3 or 4 days, and they could all get the spacing between each other to not care about seeding. But then at 6, 7, and 8, I do think there will be a race for number 6. So you're going to see Washington, Miami, and Milwaukee, or pardon me, not necessarily a race for 6, but a race to see who can, in my opinion, probably they want to avoid the Cavs, even though the Sixers, if I had to take the Sixers versus the Cavs right now in a playoff series, I'd take the Sixers. But so the East, I guess in short, is going to be quite a jumble, and we'll have to see how that goes. But Otto Porter, those guys, I'm not optimistic that they'll be at peak levels.
What about Dennis Schroeder? He's another one that just sort of mysteriously vanished. We saw Isaiah Tyler. Isaiah Taylor, not Tyler. Fill in here. I mean, do we have any idea how long Schroeder is going to be benched or shelved or whatever we want to call this? The latest in the Tank Fest out in Atlanta?
So I saw that injury and it didn't look great, but he's young, man. Like, you saw John Collins' ankle injury looked pretty bad. What we like to call a monther. And he just, within a week he was back out there because he's young and, everything's still elastic. Same thing with Schroeder. But if you were trying to secure, the last, or probably right now, they're 2.5 games behind Phoenix, the ultimate bad franchise.
Ugh.
For the number 1 slot. They're tied with Memphis right now. One surefire way to really improve your odds would be to be very slow with how you bring back Dennis Schroeder. And Isaiah Taylor, though, I mean, this is a guy that we've been talking about for a while. And, having shown up on the stat sheet, and now here he is. He's going to be great down the stretch.
Okay, let's talk about some guys that are actually coming back from injury or other nebulous contract situations. Tyrone Wallace. He seems to have a path all of a sudden. He comes back, and Milos Teodosic immediately goes down, and Wallace actually had a pretty good game. That Wednesday night?
Yeah, he's been on the radar for doing that, not all season, but, God, a really long time. You just have never known what, the contract status would be. And So I think from an opportunity standpoint, he can be productive. I worry that they're going to bring back Danilo Gallinari, and it's just going to ruin everybody's chemistry. On the outside of the playoff chase, still not dead, not a great chance at making it. But he's kind of a constant right now. I would say give him a look, but you're hoping by doing this that you get the ultimate garbage time special. Because if it's not that, if they somehow hang around the playoff chase and Danilo gets back, I think he gets marginalized in that process. You probably hope that the Clippers lose a couple games here real quick. Danilo's like, screw it. Why would I come back, and try to play through this? And the Clippers start resetting and looking for next year.
And Hassan Whiteside is another name that returned
that's gotta hurt.
in their last ball game. He only played 16, 17 minutes, but he was fairly productive in them, which is kind of his MO, where he's actually really not a whole lot worse in a couple fewer minutes. He can kind of go hard. That's going to cause a little bit of a shakeup in Miami, but we all kind of knew this day was coming, right? Where it was like probably about 2 weeks before the end of the year, Whiteside's going to get himself going again. They released no information on his hip injury, basically since they were like, oh yeah, his hip hurts. And then they just kept him out for a while, and then suddenly he's just back and ready to go. So what do we make of it? Miami's going to become a bit clogged again.
Yeah, I mean, you looked at that last game, and it was like, kind of a classic clogged Miami box score. And what can you say? What can you do? I mean, Tyler Johnson might be, minimized a little bit. He's not going to miss time because of the ankle injury, but you got Dwayne Wade's back. It's going to be so interesting to see how Miami reacts in the playoffs if they just revert back to give the ball to Dwayne and get out of the way. That run, talking about Kelly Olynyk, top 15 player over the last month, that run's over.
Yeah, that'll put a little bit of a dent into it. So, hey, wait a minute. Why don't we use that as a little bit of a segue here? The Hoop Ball 6 has been wildly productive in the month of March. Some of these guys took a little longer to get going, but good Lord. I mean, Taurean Prince now is inside the top 70 in 9-cat. That's with some pretty ugly turnover numbers this year.
Yeah, he hung a 7 the other night.
Yeah, ouch.
Department. That's, but I mean, when I went and I watched film, and Dan, you know this. Remember, we gave this one away for free in like June. Morphed into an offensive playmaker, and his dribble's not all that tight. So between that and not having all the tools on his way to the hoop, he turns it over a lot. And I just never thought. I thought 9-cat would be his strength, and I didn't expect him to handle this much, and I also thought that he would be kept in a box a little bit, but they've really just let him go all year. And Bud sometimes has to reel him in, and he'll bench him, and there'll be up and down games because he's young and he's not in the grand scheme of things a top NBA player by any means. But we liked him because there was a path to minutes, and his stat set was strong, and so I ranked him higher for 9-cat than I did for 8-cat. But what's happened here is the Hoop Ball 6 is just insane. If you took those 4 guys that I tweeted about earlier, if you took Ingles, Olynyk, James Johnson, and Prince, you got them all in rounds 8 in the case of Prince. At the earliest, in some leagues you're getting Prince in like round 10. That's like the back end of your draft, giving you top 25 numbers during the most important time of the year. If you told me that's what they were going to do, I don't think I'd have believed you.
Yeah, it's been a weird, right? And that's the beauty also of Roto too. And obviously for head to head, it's awesome that they're going so big in a lot of people's fantasy playoffs or potentially after they're over. But with Roto, you wrote out some kind of weird months. Like Taurean Prince obviously had to find himself early on in the season. Joe Ingles had a rough stretch in the middle when Rudy Gobert was down. We saw, and you and I called that one. We're like, look, everything's going to be fine when Gobert comes back because he's the guy they built this whole thing around. But you look at the end of the year and you sort of roll it all together, And you've got a guy in Taurean Prince and Ingles who've been incredibly durable. Ingles has been almost the opposite, right, of Taurean Prince. He's just been steady as she goes. He had a slump when Gobert was down, but overall he's just sort of been there every night. And Taurean Prince is like one night 2 points, 2 boards, and the next 35 with 8 3-pointers. But at the end of the day, you average it all out, and when they're playing every night, you've got two guys that have been, in particular, really strong assets in a roto format. You look at the end, you're like, oh, awesome. I'm really glad that these guys have been there all season long because that's been really helpful for my team. And that's why I think people get caught up. There's this thing, and I'd like to actually get into it a little bit with you here because, like I said, I've got my list and we've got a couple of questions, but there's the per game versus totals battle that goes on in fantasy sports. But to a certain degree, aren't they both important?
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to look at it in terms of totals at the end of the day because that's kind of what happened, and there's ways to nibble around the edges and, try to figure out like the potency aspect and, how it relates to decisions that you're making, and you got all these different formats where, if you have a games played cap, how that relates, if you're looking at weekly versus daily to be able to accommodate for various things like consistency has a certain premium that it adds to a player. And so it's a wobbly discussion, but you got to kind of come back to those two core stats that you pointed out, the cumulative and the per game. And then you can assess. I mean, and especially like in a weekly league, for instance, a per game player that you can stash on a bench while they're healthy is really potent still. You're getting replacement value from somebody, and then the replacement value that is kind of determined by how many roster spots you have and how weak the bottom of your roster is. So it's really, cumulative is still king in my opinion. That's why when I build out the Bruski 150, I'm basically telling you this is what I think the cumulative rankings will look like at the end of the year. And then you can go from there. You can tweak whatever if you for a head-to-head player, if you got a certain build or if you have a certain philosophy on how that works, you can sort of incorporate it into that. If you wanted to look at playoff schedules, you can move guys up and down as you see fit with that. But at the end of the day, that cumulative ranking is really important, and that's where it turns into a bit of a crapshoot. You just don't know who the next Gordon Hayward is, who the next, is Marcus Cousins going to go down? Is, LeBron going to play like, he's the only player on the team all season long? It's I don't want to say it's crapshoot because there's certain elements of it that aren't a crapshoot, but there is at the end of the day a lot of, what if.
What do we got on the Sacramento Kings? I want my weekly Kings update. Who's playing? Who's not playing? It seems like they finally are actually doing a little bit more youth-y.
They're struggling with not having developed their guys earlier in the season. So now when we're at the end of the year, they don't quite have the chemistry. Like last night, they played pretty well against the Pacers. Didn't do the individual things that they needed to do in order to win that game. But the chemistry was improving a little bit. What I've seen with them, though, is so many different rotations and so many different, kind of like with Zach Randolph, for instance, when he plays 1 out of every 3 games or takes 1 game off out of every 3 games. This was probably about a month ago. The way the team plays in that game is so different than when he's not playing, that these guys haven't really been able to figure out what they're trying to do on the basketball court. That said, I think the chemistry has improved. They're, especially offensively, just kind of seeing them play off of each other within the scheme. They are getting to their 3rd and 4th reads. Their counters are stronger. So I think that that's all better. I don't know that, I think the big ugly line was Scal last night. He just sort of didn't get involved, and maybe a little of that's Willie Cauley-Stein. I swear Willie, if he gets the ball right now, is just going to take it and drive it to the rim. And he was successful against Dirk on Tuesday, and he really had no business taking any of the shots that he took. They just went in, and that's his sort of his MO right now is to to be an offensive guy. And so Scal took a back seat. Bogey got back on track. Buddy Hield has been great, for the second half of the season. So that's a win for us because we were begging you guys to buy low. So they're just it's a really unique situation going on right there. Vince Carter, Garrett Temple, the protests that are going on, while I was there, covering them. They have a pretty good vibe around them right now as far as the team goes. And, having a Vince Carter in your locker room, that's been a really good pickup for the Kings. They overdid it. They shouldn't have got George Hill, shouldn't have got Zach Randolph. But, to the extent that Zach Randolph handles his business off the court, he's been great in that locker room. So even on that side, he's been benefiting them. But Vince Carter has taken these young guys aside, and he's just really bringing that adult vibe to the room. And it still gets out there and buries a few threes every once in a while. But I think that they're going to go with these core guys. I don't think Zach's playing for the rest of the year. That's just my gut. Saw him in pregame in the locker room availability, and this looked like I think he had a big old meal, prepared for the by the food staff. And I'm sitting there looking at that thing, and I'm like, yeah, you're not playing after you eat that, man.
Yeah, that is not a running meal.
No. And so, I don't think he's going to be playing. I mean, they might get him into like maybe 2 to 3 games the rest of the way just to keep him, somewhat in shape. And Jaeger has this thing where he thinks these veterans deserve to play. So I think you're going to see 2 to 3 games for Zach Randolph. That'd be my over-under there. I think all of your key guys are going to play. It's just going to be inconsistent from night to night on who's going to produce.
Let's take a trip down I-80. Warriors have some guys coming back. Kevin Durant didn't want to play all 4 quarters yesterday. He got himself tossed at halftime. But Draymond Green appears to be back. Kevin Durant is back. It sounds like Klay Thompson might make his return in one half of their back-to-back coming up over the weekend. Steph Curry obviously out until the playoffs. Does that mean it's time to basically punt on anybody besides the main cogs, or does Quinn Cook still hold value even after the 3 nearly healthy Warriors are all back in the lineup?
Yeah, I wouldn't be punting on Quinn Cook. I think that there's enough value in him handling the ball. Kevin Durant's going to handle. Yeah, Draymond Green's going to handle. And yes, Klay will handle. But I think there's enough value in having him just handle the ball and not run over to the corner and just stand there. I think if they're going to have him on the floor, they're just going to let him kind of do just enough to where he can get a trickling of stats, the 10, 12, 14 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. And, I think in the money counting department, he'll have a pretty good chance of getting 3, per game. And that would keep him at a low end value. And then when they start to rest guys in addition to this, I think they're going to give more time off to Draymond Green. Kevin Durant, I would expect him to kind of get some time off. And I think with Klay, they're probably going to let him play. So there would be opportunities there as those other guys sit down and don't play. The other guys, Jordan Bell, really, the thing with Jordan Bell is he's capable of doing this to you on any given night. How you would use him, I don't know. I mean, they got a 4-game week upcoming, and if you want to gamble that he can play 70 minutes, that in those 70 minutes, he can probably get you, 4 or 5, or maybe like 8 to 10 combined defensive stats and a trickling of other numbers if everything goes well. I do think that Draymond Green's shoulder and just in general, I think he's banged up. So he would be a guy, especially as he's been carrying some weight here with these other guys out. I think he could be a guy that gets games off. So gambling on both him and Kevin Looney last night, a steal and 3 blocks. He's been phenomenal. And I've had him in lineups. And I think he's got another good 4-game stretch this upcoming week. I actually would have Looney over Bell. And I think Looney might even be a must-start player unless you just don't need, his stats. He's well positioned to take advantage of that last 4-game week.
Let me ask you about a couple of tanking teams next. I got to go to Chicago because they're now officially just resting Lauri Markkanen in half of their back-to-backs and possibly every other game. We don't know for sure if it's a back-to-back thing or if it's we'll play him half our games the rest of the way because he's certainly one of their better players and arguably their best player who's not truly hurt right now. Robin Lopez got ejected from a basketball game, presumably because he was so angry from sitting on the sidelines for a month. I mean, this is a pretty serious tank fest, and it doesn't seem like they want to play anybody 30-plus minutes either. They're going the sort of the Brooklyn 2017 model. Anything we can glean out of Chicago? I mean, this is like you're teetering on the edge here. Denzel Valentine looked like a guy who might get it done, and then he really took a let me dial back how I was going to refer to that. He was unpleasant. He was malodorous in their last ball game. That was a rough one.
Are you going full Barkley on us right now?
I am. I was going to say that. No, you can't trick me into saying what I was going to say. It was not good. He was ungood.
Odiferous? Is that what you were going for?
I think malodorous is a word.
I'm going to defer to you, Mr. Cal Berkeley grad.
I don't know. I can't look it up. I don't have any windows available on my computer right now. He was bad. He was ungood. But is he a guy? I mean,
well, okay, so we're talking Bulls here.
Yeah.
And that's the Bulls stuff.
Yeah. Thank you. That's where I was going with it.
Good luck with anything there. I like Zach LaVine. I think he's done for the year. Denzel Valentine, I think, was, somebody that had given you what you needed out of this situation, which is some consistency. I think that might actually be a knee issue there for him and why he might be struggling. He's not been healthy, in his college career and certainly came into the league with knee issues. So like maybe that's a thing that makes him very risky. I'd still trend towards, wanting him on your team in a 12 to 14 team format, especially competitive leagues where good players are hard to find. He has a great shooting stat set. And so that's what's been making him as valuable as he has been down the stretch. When Cristiano Felicio has to sit, after not playing all year, I mean, it just kind of sums it up. The Lopez twins in general, I think, need like more pub around the league. When they get ejected, it's some serious theater.
It's awesome. That was a great ejection. Noah Vonleh, by the way, a guy that I had pushed last year as a potential Portland Trailblazers specialist. He's actually been okay with everybody else out. But that's the step, right? And everyone else needs to be gone. Yeah,
and I mean, Bobby Portis, they're just letting him do whatever he wants out there. He's a safe play, I guess, unless you can't handle 7 turnovers, which is what he did. And that's, to me, it's just like, what are we doing here? You made Bobby Portis the point guard. How did that happen?
Let's talk about another team that's doing really awesome things. The Phoenix Suns. Are you excited?
Do this, Dan? I knew this was coming. This is why I was actually not looking forward to this part.
I prepared us with some other things that were less obscene. Phoenix has gotten rid of everybody. They've just benched the entire team. They may or may not be badly hurt, but they're hurt enough. So they're trotting out. And I said this on a podcast earlier this week. I watched some Phoenix basketball for the first time in like a solid month. I had sort of avoided watching them because things had kind of settled a little bit. And then I watched it just to see what was going on out there. And it was the worst basketball that I've seen in probably 3 or 4 years. And that's about as far back as my memory goes these days. No passing. None. Zero. I watched a quarter and a half of basketball and not one pass on the offensive side.
Let me ask you this. If your coach tells you not to do something, but that coach ain't going to be there next year, and you know it, like, are you going to do it?
I might still do it because I'm kind of a goody two-shoes, but I see where you're going with this one. And also, the thing is, like, as soon as one guy stops doing it, then they all stop doing it. Because if Josh Jackson doesn't pass the ball, then why would anybody give it to him? Or if Tyler Ulis isn't going to pass the ball, why would they give it to him? Or Troy Daniels? The list goes on and on.
You give it to one of those guys, you ain't getting it back.
No, it's Chuck City down there. And if one chucker goes down, they got plenty in the wings ready to step in and start chucking. I was flabbergasted that they were competitive in that ball game. Blown away.
I know. There's what do you say? But we're going to do a Cause and Brew show later today. We're going to talk about the worst franchises in the NBA.
Okay, so
Guess
save
what?
save
the Suns will be on that list. What can you say about it? Like, I mean, let's go statistically. It's a fantasy show. Alfred Payton apparently has a knee thing. I'm not 100% sure it's not a I don't like you guys thing. But probably a knee thing. Who knows? That makes him risky. Shaquille Harrison is somebody that I think is at least on your radar a little bit. Devin Booker, his hand looked terrible about 10 days ago. I think he's getting closer. I don't think they're going to race him back. Tyler Ulis is interestingly productive right now. And it's weird because, like, if this was an injury that's really made him not what he was at the end of last year, why not help the guy out and tell some people? Like, everybody just thought he sucked all year. It's like he lost his fastball. And no, apparently it's an injury. And he's been, out there being disruptive in the passing lanes, doing what he does on defense to accommodate for his size. And then on the offensive side, getting into the lane aggressively, looking like the fast guy that got him to the NBA. I think he's pretty good. Then from there, it's just tough. Like, Big Sauce doesn't have any lift. So even if Alex Len doesn't play, you kind of just wonder, what can he actually do? Marquise Chris is finally good after everybody, including myself, was like, screw you, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't think we can blame ourselves for moving on from Marquise Chris. There's a week and a half left in the NBA season. That had been a long time to wait.
Well, but it also kind of, like, if you're going to be terrible and not teach your team much, in the process, why not have your guy go out there and put up numbers like he's capable of putting up in a 30-minute role? And I know that with Chris specifically, like, I trust that Triano's, like, probably in the right with a lot of that stuff, but he sometimes you have to just change the script. Like, here's your number 8 pick. You traded Bogdan Bogdanovic, who looks pretty damn good right now, and the rights to Scal to get the asset, and now you're like, screw the asset, we're just going to move on. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I think you might split the difference and give him more than 18 minutes per game. Give him like 23, 24. Maybe keep him in the starting lineup as a holding starter. I think there's a number of things that are going wrong with that team. It makes you just question it up and down the line. Like, Dragon Bender, is that guy ever going to shoot?
No, come on, we got to get that WAC league going. I'm so excited for that next year.
I'm kind of excited for that as well.
Yeah, I want to bring Shane Battier out of retirement.
But you know what? Shane was a money counting stat guy. But I get you. And late in his career, he was very bad.
Yeah.
Tayshaun Prince.
Oh boy, he really became.
And of course, the MVP of the WAC Fantasy League. Kendrick Perkins. Kendrick
Perkins, ladies and gentlemen. I wish I had a soundboard. I wish I had the RAM in this computer to fire up a soundboard for a round of applause. So it'll just have to be me. Kendrick Perkins, ladies and gentlemen. WAC Fantasy MVP. I got one or two things left. Then we'll take our couple of questions and wrap this bad boy up. Trey Burke, he looks awesome.
Yeah, what a difference it can do when your team has your best interest in mind. Like, so this was a Scott Perry pickup. He has come in and been given kind of run of the yard. He's making an absurd amount of shots right now. I think he's still above 50%.
That does seem a bit unsustainable, right? I mean, I guess it could be sustainable for another week, right?
No, it's not sustainable.
But for a week, it could be.
Put it this way. I have a field goal percentage chase in one of my leagues, and I looked at Trey Burke's 55% over that whatever span. I think it was like 13, 15 games. And I laughed. I was like, I'm an idiot. I am chasing this, and I'm not going to. There's no chance he's going to go, 5 of 20. It just doesn't make any sense. But I was like, I'll gamble. I'll go with him.
Yeah, it could be next year.
And then he got 41 points. And it was like, he's not going to stop. And I think, though, he's doing what he does best. getting to the spots on the floor that he's comfortable shooting in. He is a different player. I'll give Scott Perry credit for finding a player that is, on the rise. I don't think the calculus has changed on what he is. I don't think he's like, a lot of people coming into the league. I mean, he was the odds-on favorite for Rookie of the Year because of where he landed in Utah. It didn't work out. It does sound like he's made changes in his life. He's made changes with his body. He's a lot stronger now. But I don't think this is like the beginning of something, that's going to really change his career trajectory. And it's in New York. I trust Trey Burke in fantasy leagues right now because he's got management support and everybody else is so terrible. But I don't really trust anybody in New York right now.
It's weird. They're actually playing starters right now. I know Enes Kanter's back hurt, but he saw like 30 minutes. Tim Hardaway Jr.'s playing 30
doubtful
minutes
for the next one.
Right.
I might be relying on. I have a team that's cruising in first place that's had Kanter all year and never used him once because my other two centers are Karl Anthony Towns and Joel Embiid.
Wow, you really should have traded Kanter for something.
I'm so lazy, dude. I couldn't bring myself to deal with the aspect of trading.
Oh.
And so, but now that I might need Kanter, like I don't trust Kanter next week because, let's take a quick peek at how much the Knicks have progressed in the tank battle. And maybe this is why they're going to play starters more. They're probably stuck in the 9 slot. They're not going any further down or up the list, however you want to look at it. The Lakers are 15 games back of number 1 Phoenix.
They were Knicks were kind of like mediocre plus for way too long this year with Porzingis healthy. They got a chunk they got to jump there.
I think they tried to take a run at the tank battle and found that you can't catch the Bulls. Like that's just not possible. You can't catch the Brooklyn. It's funny. Brooklyn doesn't have their pick. It's Cleveland's pick, but they're doing their thing that we talked about earlier.
That's like the battle between being tanky and being bad. Brooklyn is bad right now because they're force-feeding D'Angelo Russell, right? They just stopped winning when they were like, we got to see what we've got in this kid, so on and so forth. We've seen how that story goes. Last question for you, Brew, from Dan's list. Thoughts on Isaiah Thomas finally calling it a year, basically?
I feel bad, and I could probably reach out to his camp and ask, like, what's going on. I just don't have the heart to at this point, and I don't really care. The choice to go for it this year, I think it was Jeff Zilgett of USA Today said, don't complain about players not playing through injuries or, like you ask these guys to do X, Y, Z. You ask them to be honest with the media and then they're honest, and then you burn them to the ground for the Brinks comment. Like he was asked a question in a gaggle setting where, it's a lot of jokes and it's, whatever. And, they ask him like, well, what about the contract? You got to better back up the Brinks truck. And that's been used almost as a look at this athlete, quote unquote, who's not happy with the amount of money he makes. And he's not happy with coming off the bench. And he's this, this kind of bad spirit on a basketball team. No, he's a guy that when he came and played after his sister died, went and dropped a huge number in the playoffs, and then played through a hip injury that's going to end up costing him probably $80 to $100 million if you want to take a worst case scenario here, and then gets traded because it's a business, and then says, okay, you got LeBron James, I'm going to make a run at helping this guy win a championship, then gets thrown underneath the bus because he speaks truth to power. And then, of course, the media that's got to keep it all good with LeBron, they pick their words carefully. They use loaded terminology. I've seen it, happen in the past with this guy. That's why I'm always so vocal about it. Speaking of the thing that I don't know if it was on this pod or if it was in the pregame, but when you're a low pick in this league, you don't have an agent that's able to leverage a la D'Angelo Russell saying, you got to play my guy, because if you don't play my guy, who's this big time pick, then maybe I won't be so happy with you. And when we're in negotiations with the next guy, if all things are even, I might tip the scales the other way. So Isaiah has fought that his entire career. And when he got to LA and especially when he got to Cleveland, and some of this comes back to the contract situation. I think that he wanted to play. I think he wanted to win a championship with Cleveland. I think he wanted to have a great season so he could get the type of money he was probably looking at after the Boston season. It all backfired, all of it. And if there's people in his camp that knew that the hip was at risk, or however that goes, I don't think anybody really knows, to be honest. If anybody would know, it would be Woj, because I just know how that all kind of works, and I know that Woj would probably know, and he hasn't reported anything on this. So I don't think that they know necessarily kind of what the whole risk reward quotient was, or maybe they knew as much as they could, and they said, okay, we'll take a calculated risk here and have this guy come back. Watching probably the 7th, 8th, 9th games in Cleveland, you saw him in a defensive stance lift that leg like he was working the hip out. And that was my first time seeing the actual risk at hand. So when he got to LA and every shot that required like peak jumping ability and peak extension, all of those shots were coming up short. That's when it was like, okay, this thing's not getting better. And when the first report came out, I was not surprised at all. I thought, and I think it's the good decision. I mean, 4 months will fly by if everything goes well with that, and rehab can happen quickly. He can go on a 1-year deal, a la Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and if he can find the right fit, and if a team commits to playing his brand of basketball, which is incredibly efficient on the offensive side, if you surround him with shooters and defensive players, he can be this is what I said before he was in, Phoenix, Boston. He could be the ultimate Moneyball player because, like the movie says, I forget what was the pitcher's name that threw it sidearm. His flaw is that he throws funny, so you get him cheap. Isaiah's flaw is that he's been trashed in the media. He's short and he's coming off hip surgery. Whichever team plays that the right way, they're going to get a bargain.
Yeah, that's a buy low, and a real life buy low. How about that? It's not even a fantasy buy low; it's reality. Let's take a couple of questions. We only have a handful here, and then we can put a bow on this bad boy. It seems like I think we only had one real glitch, which is the ultimate test of Jinx ability here. So let's see if the whole thing falls apart now that I mentioned it. Prime T says, happy Friday of some sorts. It's Good Friday for us lovely Canadians. Prime T, I didn't know you were up in the Great White North. Happy Good Friday to everyone. Happy Passover to all of our listeners of the Jewish faith. That begins tonight at sundown. Good Friday. And, if you're eating matzah for a week, we'll see you guys next week, and you'll all be extremely irritated. I'm here for the ritual, he says. I'm out of ads and healthy players, although there is one thing I wanted to follow up on, and that is we asked, where does head-to-head basketball go from here? My league mates and I spoke about it, and I think we're just going to start the playoffs a week after the All-Star break. We talked about that last week, Brew. That does seem to be the move right now, is just like get it going right after the break, get it done by basically the middle of this month, and ignore the last roughly 3 weeks. You just kind of have to be okay with having an abridged season.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could do something with the last 4 weeks of the season or something like a short, quick redraft season, that's people won't be prepared for. I mean, you can use the projections here and get a good baseline, sort of ranking system out of it, but you'd be guessing, and that can be fun. And maybe that's a way to bridge the gap during this part and make it enjoyable in those formats. I was just kind of putting myself like through the what ifs if I was a part of that. There's something about the last week of the season in, like football, week 16. I mean, in football, they deal with this and it's just like 1 week, week 17. But they actually, I got to take that back. It's been getting worse and worse there too. Week 16, week 15. week 14 have all kind of turned into tanking situations. But if you can, like that to end the season relatively close to the actual end of the season and have your fantasy season decided in that place, it just kind of feels right. Maybe that's just because it's the way it's always been. I think we got to look to creative solutions, and unfortunately, I can't talk about some of them because they're actually ideas that we have in the works. But
all right, well, we can move along then. Trevor Ariza came out as day-to-day. Should I drop him for Rashawn Holmes if this is my finals week?
Yes.
All right, there you go. This is a very specific question, which I assume we're being informed of because normally we don't answer them. But because there are so few, we'll get into it. I need to open up 2 spots on Sunday because it is one of those overload days this week. Which of the following guys should I drop? I need to drop 2 of 4. I need to drop 2 of these 4 guys. The 4 names are Mario Hezonja, Corey Brewer, Nico Mirotic, and Rashawn Holmes.
I hate to dropping 2?
Dropping 2. I hate to say it, but I think Nico's got to be on the list because he doesn't look healthy.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, and then that brings us to Holmes versus.
I might drop Hezonja if Jonathan Isaac is actually going to play the next couple of games.
Man, the Magic are very tanky right now. They're banged up. Jonathan Simmons isn't going to play again, I don't think, this year. They've got a hole in that backcourt, and I think Mario fills it. Who was the 4th guy there?
Corey Brewer, who's actually been pretty damn good in Oklahoma City, too.
Man.
And he gives you nice steals and threes, and he does it on decent percentages. That's a tough drop, too.
The schedule comes into play next week. The Thunder have 2 games. I can't do Brewer in that scenario.
Yeah, maybe you make it a look ahead. That's fair. Let's see
and I
here.
think Holmes is going to go big. So
that'd be nice.
They've got a great schedule, too. They'll have 4 games and then 2 games that final week. So
they do. They've had a great schedule for weeks now. Roberto Gama says, let's go Dodgers. I agree. Baseball season is upon us, Brew.
Hey, did they win against the Giants last night? Everybody was watching that in the locker room, and I thought, whoa, I know so little about baseball now.
A 1-0 3-hour game. So baseball obviously.
Did the Dodgers win the World Series?
How dare you?
Did they?
How dare you, Bruski?
I honestly don't know.
Oh no, they lost to the Houston Astros. It was a hell of a series, man. That
painful for you guys?
That series took 2 years off my life. Let's see. What else we got here? Charleston says, nice haircut. Thank you. Yeah, it's the only thing I did this week outside of taking care of the kid. I did lop off a lot of hair.
I haven't even looked at the stream.
Yeah, I don't think you. Oh, yeah, you can look at the stream. I was going to say I'm not sending you my webcam directly, but you can actually look at the YouTube deal. Last Friday for me, says Chris Penfield. We're going to do one more, by the way. Who to pick up for tonight? Rashawn Holmes or Marquise Chris?
Oh, frickin' Marquise Chris is so.
Oh, you're tantalized. I can see that's the look.
I am tantalized because
That's that face right there is tantalized, Bruski. It's a weird
because it feels like Chris is gonna walk into a top 50 line, and it feels like Holmes still has to deal with a little bit of BS. And
yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
When you look at the aggregate, I take Holmes. If you look at who are the matchups? Not that it matters.
I can't look. I'm hamstrung here by a slow computer.
This is tonight's, right?
Yeah, tonight.
Tonight's games.
Phoenix is in Houston. I'm almost certain of that.
Philly has Atlanta. Oh God, Holmes is gonna tear that up.
All right, so you're Holmes tonight then?
I think yeah. And Phoenix against Houston. That's ripe for Marquise Chris. Just like stupid stuff.
Clint Capella is gonna turn him into a chunk of fromage. Where's Clint Capella from? He's not French, is he? He's like Austrian or something.
Swedish,
that's right. Okay. I don't speak Swedish.
Yeah, I'm going to go over Rashawn Holmes.
Wait a minute. Are you sure he's not Swiss?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yay, America! Let's see. Blake Griffin, we already addressed that question. Yes, he's basically a drop unless you want to try to hold out for 1 or 2 games of Roto. Jared Allen or Marquise Chris?
For tonight, let me just see who Brooklyn's playing, if they're playing. So there's not a tonight question because they're not playing tonight.
Yeah, they're tomorrow and Sunday, and Phoenix is today and Sunday.
Who do they play?
I do not know.
Oh, come on, Dan.
I can't do anything. My phone is being used as a light, and my computer is
All right,
being used to its max.
the Nets have Miami, and then they get Detroit. That's not good for Jared Allen. But I mean, Drummond could mess him up pretty good, and then Miami's playing for playoff seeding. It's a good team. Just depending on who he lines up against. I'm going to go with Marquise Chris.
Okay, let's add one more name to the mix. Marquise Chris, Richaun Holmes, or Kevon Looney. Sounds like you like Looney.
So Golden State at Sacramento is a classic rest spot. The starters for the Warriors always let up in Sacramento. I think that would be a game. You notice I didn't figure out how to turn my sound off. So terrible. That's a great matchup for Looney. Even though when you look at the matchup specifically, like Scal and Willie Cauley-Stein should theoretically match up with Kevin Looney pretty well. But they still got a lot of problems. The thin towers in Sacramento, and then the Lakers, Looney. Or pardon me, no, I'm looking at the wrong matchup. Golden State, Phoenix. Oh man, I'm gonna go Kevin Looney above them all. How about that?
There you go. Here's a question I bet you didn't expect you'd get, and I can honestly say I don't even know who this guy is. Any thoughts in a dynasty format on Jonah Bolden?
Is that a baseball writer?
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I'm assuming he's a college or overseas player. I'm thinking college.
Yeah, I don't know who it is.
Oh, this is a stash pick in Australia because we have a strong Australian contingent, I'm sure. 22-year-old. This was the 36th pick of last year's draft. No, I have no idea. But I mean, if he's owned by Philly, he's gonna have a hard time getting into the rotation. They're stacked right now. So I think in a dynasty league, you would want to look at his stat set, of course. And I would say, give me 3 seconds, and
yeah, I dropped a weird one on you. Connor Sullivan coming through with the goofy question of the day.
Well, I mean, look, he gets 2.0 combined steals and blocks. He's got 0.8 threes in 21 minutes a game for Maccabi Fox. It's not a crazy good league. I mean, it's Euro League, I don't know. I don't think he's gonna. I mean, what are you trying to do? 3 to 4 years from now, I think would be when he would be usable in a fantasy league. So I'm not that optimistic, though. I do see what you see, like the steals, blocks, threes combo. Free throws are a mess, 51%.
Yeesh.
So
well,
he doesn't take any, so it doesn't really matter.
I have to instinctively love anybody who's playing for a Maccabi team, but I have no idea who this guy is. So.
That's a good question, though. That woke me up.
Yeah, it did. Is Chris Dunn Chris Dunn done for the season? I need to read that one slower.
Dun 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 dun.
He's out for the year, right?
Yeah. Now that you heard my pun joke, right?
Yeah, I like puns. It's a dad joke.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, he's done. Let's see what else we got here. We talked about IT a little bit. We can Charleston, by the way, here, Brew. Let me lob you this question. Maybe you and Kaz can address it on the Kaz and Brew show, but it's not really a fantasy question. I don't want to go back into the other stuff. IT, was he ever a top 10 player? Put that one in your mailbag for Kaz and Brew. You don't have to answer right now.
I can answer it. I don't think he was.
Okay. All right.
I mean, there's too many good players in the league.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think he was top 10. No, I don't think he was worth a max deal, or, maybe not even up to the edge of it. But I do think he was worth a lot of money, and I think you could build an offense around him and address each other position way more aggressively and create a team that fits around him. Look, there are very few players in the league that can do what he does. So to that extent, yeah, he's worth it.
Would you recommend using all of my ad/drops the first week of a, I'm assuming, Roberto, you mean the 10-day finals. I would say save one for the last 3-day stretch. Just in case.
Yeah, you might even slow play a little bit in the front end.
Oh,
you
without
do
question.
want to stack games played depending on your needs, but like being able to pivot hard, say you need field goal percentage, free throw percentage, or whatever it is that you need to pivot hard that direction, you might enjoy 2.
Yeah, that's
picks.
true. Look for some teams. There are like 5 or 6 teams, and I don't have the schedule grid open right now because, again, computer issue. But there are like 5 or 6 teams that go 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Nobody plays Monday of next week because of the college championship game. So you can kind of condense your 10 days roughly into 8 because basically everyone plays on the last day too. And that's another way to think about that. Make your 4 moves or however many you got. Use them over probably like the first 7-ish days of that, first 8 days or so of that 10-day stretch, excluding the first Monday, obviously. And to me, that I think is a way you can kind of maximize games and make sure you don't get stuck with somebody injured. What is your personal best for trades in a season? XORAD says, I made 14 trades this year, and I'm currently in the finals. That's a lot, man. I've never actually tracked it myself. Brew, I don't know. I know you have so many leagues going. You can't, like you said, you sat on Ennis Cantor all year.
The idea of 14 trades, that's... when I played one league way back in the day, I did try to trade a lot. So I get it. I'm in like awe.
I think I had like
14.
5 or 6 this year in one of my leagues. That was pretty good for me. It's pretty sizable.
This guy falls in the category of trades just to trade at some point, at some level. Like the excitement of the trade is more important than the trade itself.
Yeah, and sometimes you know by doing that, if you do it enough times, you can sort of like, it's kind of like that slide a tile around game that people play on their computers, or you had like the little handheld one where there's 16 spaces but 15 tiles and you can just slide one over. You might not know what I'm talking about. It's a little brain teaser thing. But you just keep moving tiles eventually, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, perfect. This is the one. Our buddy Seth Klein, actually, who's been coming on some shows, he kind of did that in a league that I'm in with him, and then all of a sudden at the end you looked at his team and it is just stacked. Like, how did all these pieces move around? And then all of a sudden he's got like Clint Capella, James Harden, Rudy Gobert, Russell Westbrook. It's just this absurd laundry list of top 30 guys, and no one even noticed it was happening. That's the beauty of it. It was like, look over here, and then all of a sudden he's beating the hell out of everyone. Nobody's even going to come close. Kevon Looney or Noah Vonleh? We got another Kevon Looney versus...
No. Looney.
If the Utah Jazz meet the Warriors in the first round, would you take the Jazz with a nice underdog value?
That's a question straight off of yesterday's show at Wagerline. Or what are they calling their show nowadays?
Is it Wager Talk?
Wager Talk. Thank you. It didn't sound right. Wager landed in my head. It didn't sound right. It's so I would not. No, I don't think they can beat the Warriors.
Yeah, I agree. What you can do, though, by the way, and then, Brew, I know you have more. I just want to jump in and say there's a common theory in playoff battles called the zigzag theory in sports betting, where a team that wins in the playoffs creates such an enormous tidal wave of media attention in their direction that the line actually tends to follow that wave. It's slightly overblown. The zigzag theory is not perfect, but if you look for games where, particularly if it's sort of a wide finish, like if the Warriors beat the Jazz by 25 in the first game, that's a situation where you look at the Jazz and the next one, say, you know what, this line probably over-adjusted due to the Warriors winning, due to the large spread on it, due to it sort of validating what people thought was going to happen anyway. Then you look for individual games, but in a series, yeah, that's a spot where, to me, maybe, Brew, you take the Jazz before game one, hope that they can steal one, catch the Warriors with their pants down, and then you could actually bet the Warriors for the series the following day and middle it, where you have money on both sides, but your overall is a net gain. I got into the deep stuff on gambling there a little bit. Sorry.
I love it. I mean, that's all fantasy players really have after, this week. I don't... A lot of people are picking up on that, and I like the Warriors are no longer negative money to win the NBA championship,
which to me makes them a great value all of a sudden.
Yeah,
This is the Warriors' time.
Absolutely. I mean, Houston, to me, it's just not there yet. And yeah, Steph, if he's not there, Chris Paul doesn't have his nemesis anymore. But I don't know. There's still a lot of players. Like, you're counting on Clint Capella in a playoff series to be, what he's been all year. You're counting on. I mean, I think there is experience up and down that roster that can function like playoff experience. But I mean, the guys at the top, James Harden, I mean, he choked last year. Like, there's question marks with the Rockets, whether they're choking or not. I think the team that I think the Wolves might scare me more than the Jazz for the Warriors.
Right, if Jimmy Butler comes back or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just like, I mean, they kind of just have enough firepower. If you're talking about a team without Steph, Thunder could even make some noise there.
That's the one. I think the Thunder's the one, but they probably will be.
Oh, and you know who I said on the show? I said the Spurs.
Right, if they get Kawhi back, he
if
just
they get
pops
Kawhi
up.
back, exactly.
So there are some weird scenarios here. A lot of the stuff for the Warriors that feels scarier is probably more second roundy, but I guess you never know where these teams might drop. If somebody falls into the 7 seed, it can all happen in one day.
That Steph's, gonna. I mean, I don't. Steph thinks he could play in round 1. Let's say he's not. Say he plays and he's not Steph. I would think he doesn't play, or they. That'll be an interesting storyline. Kerr is ruling him out, and Steph saying, "Nah, I want to try to push back." But I would think you got to ding him in the first round. The Spurs were up by 20 before, good old Zaza threw his foot underneath Kawhi Leonard's ankle and ruined his career, from what I hear. Worst fantasy pick of all time.
Yeah. So I think we'll get an idea of what's going on there when we have Steph Curry. But certainly from the value standpoint, you don't bet against a team when people are already fading them. People are fading the Warriors right now because Steph Curry went down. This is not the time. This is actually the time. In fact, it's the greatest value you've had on them all season long because they came into this thing as the prohibitive favorites. If you had bet the Rockets at the beginning of the year, that would have been a good time to get on Houston. Now would be a good time not probably to get on Houston because they're the number 1 and everybody's like, oh, well, they can sneak by. Bear in mind, if nobody knocks the Warriors out, Steph would probably be back by the time they saw the Rockets in the playoffs because the playoffs in the NBA take forever.
I know, right? Like,
that'll be June by the time they play.
That's why basketball writers have these baggy eyes. They're like, they think it's over, and then it's like, oh no, it has just begun.
It has just begun. Would you fade Portland? That's a question from Charleston. Just like in a playoff standpoint, I actually like the Blazers.
I like Portland. But here's the thing. If they stick where they're going to stick, I think, at the 3 seed, I think that takes away your value. I think just the pure number 3 makes people think, oh, Portland's so much better. I don't think, honestly, I mean, I would take them against the Pelicans and the Wolves, but not the Jazz and not the Thunder, and probably not the Spurs. And I think Portland's improved.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that they're a better team, but like, well, they got that addition of Corey Brewer really made them unique.
OKC, they're just like they stealing everything.
But they gotta not play Melo, and I don't know if they're there yet. Like they should literally say, Melo, you get 24 minutes a game. Shut up.
Yeah, it's not happening. I don't know how they find ways to lose, and I feel like yesterday was a prime example of that. It was just like Russell Westbrook doing too much, and the whole thing came apart. Anyway, it's 12:05
One quick thing on Russell Westbrook, since you brought his name up. He kind of looks like he's lost his fastball to me.
You think he's just gassed right now?
No, I think the knee things have added up. He just does not have the same spring that he's had in the past. But Paul George, I mean, to have Paul George there, like next to him, that just is incredibly unique.
Yeah, shame he's going to be in purple and gold next year.
I'm
just being snarky. I'm being snarky.
I mean, don't you? Why do you bring that up at the end of the show? You know we don't have time to talk about that.
No, we don't. Okay, what? Yes or no? Do you think Paul George is a Laker next year? I think he is.
It sounds like a yes.
Yeah,
but,
I think he is.
But what are you doing if you do that? Like, what are you doing? Like, do you want, as a Laker fan, do you want that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Paul George.
Okay, so who are you getting rid of?
Nobody.
How do you think that's going to work?
Oh, it'll be totally fine. You can play one of those clowns at power forward in the modern NBA. There's nobody left. There's nobody left that can bang on anyone.
You know what? There's going to be a smart coach out there, a smart organization that figures out that when everybody's zigging, that you zag. But let's assume that everybody stays dumb. You got a player in Brandon Ingram who needs the ball in his hands. You got Julius Randle who needs the ball in his hands. You got Lonzo Ball who needs the ball in his hands. And that's probably leaving a couple people out that stick around from this iteration. Like, is Paul George going to be able to handle that?
Oh, yeah. I got no problem with that. They'll figure that out.
So somebody going to be unhappy, and you don't care who.
Yeah, it'll probably be Lonzo unless he fixes his offensive game. Right. Anyway, sorry.
I was already building that into that thought, though.
Oh, then we'll be totally fine. I mean, it's going to go to Paul George. If he's the only addition, he's better than the other guys. That's how it works.
He is right now.
Yeah, he is right now.
He got a lot of mileage on them legs.
Yeah, that's true. Missed a year because the car broke down. Can you believe how good he is?
His leg snapped.
Yeah, can you believe how good he is after that? That's pretty awesome.
Remember when he got into the league and we called him baby Kevin Durant, and everybody was like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Yeah, he's
good.
He's terrific. More to come on that front. Bruski and I will have plenty of things to talk about in the off season that are not fantasy related. But for now, we're putting a pin in this one. One more of these guys. One more live Friday show next week. That's the last one. Bruski, it brings a tear to my eye to say I will see you in 1 week, and then we'll do all the sappy stuff on that one. He is Aaron Bruski. I'm Dan Besbris. Follow us on Twitter. Follow Hoopball. Go to hoop-ball.com. Read all the good stuff. See the beautiful feed. You know the rules. Aaron will be back with you on Sunday. Is that your penultimate waiver wire show? Or are you doing one the very last Sunday?
No, I'll go all the way to the end.
Okay, so Aaron's got 2 of those left, and then, of course, Fantasy NBA Today will be back on Monday. Reverse chronological lightning round and a little playoff streaming thoughts, as per usual. For Aaron, I'm Dan. We'll talk to you later. I legitimately don't know how to stop this thing, so we're still live right now.
So this is when we talk trash on everybody, right?
Yeah! Can you believe that guy